All right. Mic check. I'm good. So I'm Max Ceron. Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding Podcast. Podcast. Today we have a really cool guest. Welding Podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron with you again, and we have another great guest that we picked up from FabTech. FabTech was like my breeding ground of podcast guests. I went down there and I scooped everybody up, and today we have Alex Jordan from, let me see if I got your company name here. I got it up on my Instagram right here. You are from AM Custom Fab. Is that the name of your company?
Yes, sir.
All right, Alex, how you doing?
Good. I'm excited to be here. This is kind of new for me, but I'm excited. It was good to meet you at FabTech.
I needed some pointers right before the weld off, man. That's what I needed.
Oh, there you go.
So, Alex, number one, we ran into you at FabTech, and you were out there, and you weren't like a nobody. Like you had a slot at the Weld Online booth, and then you were doing some talks. So, you're kind of a personality, man.
I mean, that's kind of the eventual goal. We'll see. But that was really an opportunity. Justin from Fabrication, Weld Metals Online, I got to throw credit to them. He messaged me randomly and invited me out there, and it was a great experience. So
yeah, man, it was a really good time. It was great to meet you out there too. So,
Same.
a lot of people follow you on Instagram. I've been looking at some of the cool projects you got, and you got a company, and I'm going to say this right off the top for the people that are watching this on YouTube, because most people listen to the podcast, but we do have some very religious YouTube followers, and I'm going to tell them that you are not as young as you look. That threw me for a loop, dude. That threw me for a loop and a half. Like, I would have pinned you for 22 tops. And what did you say? You're 28, 29, 28?
I'm 29. I'll be 30 in November.
That is unreal, man. I feel like I got left out in the sun too long. Like at 30 years old, I'd look like a bleached raisin. You know what I mean? Like, and here you are.
You're looking good.
You're hitting 30 years old, and you look like you just stepped out of the pod, for crying out loud.
It's just because my wife won't let me grow a beard. So
That's awesome. So, first of all, let's start off. Where are you? Where are you calling in from?
I'm just north of Portland, Oregon, in the States here.
Well, Portland's a beautiful place. I love that area. You guys actually get winter and know what it's about, so it's nice. Were you born there? Is that your home stomping grounds?
Born and raised. I've lived in 3 different houses within about 3 miles of each other.
Wow.
So
And so are you right in Portland, or are you kind of outside
No.
in the rural area?
honestly, thankfully, because the city is not my jam, so I'm about 45 minutes north of Portland. So my town is St. Helens, Oregon. So we're about 25 miles north of Portland-ish.
Okay, and
So,
that's nice. And Portland isn't a huge city either, but it's big enough, eh?
yeah.
So, in your area, since you kind of grew up in a more rural zone of Oregon, what was your life as a kid coming up? You got lots of brothers and sisters. You got, what do
I
your parents
do.
do?
So are you sitting down? I'm the oldest of 13.
Oh,
So
the oldest of 13.
yeah, so I'm the oldest of 13. I grew up in this area, and my dad was a welder through high school and stuff, and he actually his face was on the board for 20 years for the welding competition, and only about 5 years ago somebody broke his record or whatever it was. I don't remember what the challenge was, and then my grandpa was a welder. He welded on tugboats for 40 years, and my dad was more in the transition to the automotive industry, and so, but he definitely did some fabrication on the side. People with cars always want welding done too and stuff. So I was immersed in that as I was younger. But what kind of got me going at it, I originally didn't want to do the automotive industry, and I wanted to build a go-kart, and that's kind of what got me all started into the fabrication.
Don't we all?
And so I built this go-kart when I was like 17 years old, and it was just out of junk around the yard. Literally, the frame was old galvanized water pipe, and it had a 17 horse Tecumseh on the back. And then I had a lawnmower transmission in it, and then I use old bike struts for the front
Yeah.
shocks, and even my what do you want to call them, like ball joints on the front.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to spend money on like rod ends or heim joints, so I drilled and tapped 1-inch bolts, and that was my pivot, the nut on the bolt, and I greased them, and that was my pivot points. And
Yeah.
so I've always just kind of been resourceful with building stuff, and I ended up building that go-kart. And then the next year, the fair, our county fair, had the theme of going green. And so I was like, well, I have this go-kart that I made of all recycled materials.
Oh yeah.
And so I ended up putting this in the county fair, and my current employer seen it, and it was kind of a roundabout thing. I'd actually took care of his wife's horses, and they were at the county fair, and he seen it, and he's like, oh, this is kind of cool. And she was like, well, that's the kid that takes care of my horses. And so
So
he
you won.
yeah. So he called me and asked me if I wanted a job, and it was kind of a random thing. I'm like, okay, what would I be doing? And he's like, well, we make puppets. And
Puppets.
so I was just like, okay. So your initial thought with puppets is you go to the hand sock puppet, and you're
My
like,
initial thought is fear. I don't know.
oh,
That's
really?
I think kind of freaked me out a little bit. Like,
Yeah, no, that's true. Get the like, but so I was like, well, what would I be doing? And he's like, well, wiring lights and bending tubing. I'm like, I can do
Mhm,
that. And I just not quite even finished high school at that point,
mhm.
but I was 18. And so I went to work for him, and he's a entertainment industry company. It's called Michael Curry Designs, and he makes large scale sets and puppets for big name corporations: Universal Studios, Disney, Circus LA, Blue Man Group, the Olympics, stuff like that. So
That's wild.
that current project, we're making a 70-foot tall polar bear for the Salt Lake Winter Olympics in winter of 09. And so I worked on that for 8 weeks for him, and then my mom said I had to finish high school. So
Jeez, stupid high
yeah, I know,
school.
right? High school. School was definitely not my forte. I'm
Well,
slightly
and you
dyslexic.
had 12 brothers and sisters. Like, I mean, one of the other ones could have done it.
Yeah, I know, right? And we all homeschooled too. So my poor mother.
Man, let me tell you, this is like sounding like the all American, like Kevin. Like if they made you into a movie, your life, it would be Kevin Bacon. Like Kevin Bacon would play who you are. It's like the all American story. Like, 13 brothers and sisters living in a rural area just outside of Portland, Oregon. Grandfather was a welder, father was a welder, and from the steel in their blood rose Alex Jordan. Like the plot is set, man. The plot is set.
Yeah, there you go.
So, you know, I love this idea that your family's welders. Man, so many people on my show, we have like relatives that kind of pulled us into this because honestly, they're not telling you to be a welder in grade 7. Like, it's not a thing teachers talk about. So, you had this kind of industry around you. Did you think that you would be a welder? Like, was it like, I'm going to be a welder? Or were you like, nah, I kind of not interested? Like, what else did you think about doing? What was what would you have
No,
liked to have done?
not really. Honestly, when I
Mm-hmm.
finished high school, plants were my jam. I wanted to be a farmer, and I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
grow crops. But a couple things, like I realized that I'm not in the area to do that. I mean, and then also like it's a lot of work for not a lot of money. And so
I live in a super agriculture area in Canada. Like, you'd have to come live where I live to grow crops. Like, we got like so like all around me, it's all there is. And somehow they seem to all be driving brand new trucks. So the money seems to be all right. Like,
I mean, that doesn't mean you have the money in the bank. That means it could be on a card too. So
that's money's money, Carter, whatever. I don't want to.
I prefer the debt-free method, but
Well, good for you, man. Good for you, because I have only heard of this method. I have yet to have experienced it.
it takes work, but it's worth it, I promise.
Awesome. Well, I'm like old balls now. I don't know if I can teach an old dog new tricks, I guess is the saying. But so you working on this cool giant bear. You're kind of working with the local guy who's got the cool company, which is awesome, right? You did at that point you think, okay, maybe I should start getting a little bit more serious about getting better, or did you think I'm just going to work for this guy forever, or what was kind of your plan there?
At that point, I was just like enthralled with having work, and it was something new, so I really
Mm-hmm.
didn't care. I've always, even before high school, I did all kinds of stuff. I ran hay crews. I ran a lot of hay crews. I did odd jobs and built stuff for people, and lots of decks, awnings, you name it. If they wanted it built, I would do it. But no, I started with him, and then I worked for him for 8 weeks, like I said, and then mom and dad said I had to finish high school, so that took me about, like, I don't know, like 4 months to finish up high school.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were in the middle of some layoffs and stuff right after that project shipped out. And I called them back as soon as I finished high school. I was like, hey, you guys have work? And they're like, no, we don't. So I went to work subcontracting for this guy. And I told the guy right off the bat, I was like, I'll work my butt off for you. But if this other company calls me back, I'll finish the day out. And I told
Mm-hmm.
him right off the bat. And I worked for him for about a month and a half. And they called me back and I finished the day out. And I've been there ever since. So I didn't start out doing actually fabrication stuff there. I started out, they didn't really know my experience and stuff. So they just kind of
Mm-hmm.
threw me into more of the crafts department. So I was doing a lot of gluing and cutting stuff out, like leaves or parts and stuff, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
that more crafty, artsy side of things. And it was just killing me watching all the guys in the fab shop there. And I worked in the kind of craft section for probably about 9 months. And then we were working on this big monster for the Arab Games. And the main welder there had two guys that was helping him out. And they were building all these kind of compound trusses, for lack of a better term. So he was setting these trusses up, which were the wing members for this monster, and it had a 70-foot wingspan. And so he was having all these guys go in and weld in all these stringers on the
Mm-hmm.
truss. And I was watching him come back through, and he was just kind of like cussing up a storm because these guys were just kind of messing it up. And at
Probably
one point,
warping the hell out of it, probably.
they were more just like burning out the tubing and stuff, because it was like, if I
Pretty
remember
thin wall.
correctly, it was like a 2-inch. The main pillars of the truss were 2-inch by like 120 wall, and then I think the stringers were probably like 095 or something like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so they were either burning through and making big holes, or they were just getting lots of porosity and stuff like that in it. And he looks up at me, and I'm like standing there gluing stuff together, and he's like, do you know how to weld? I was like, well, I have welded before. And so he shoved the stinger in my hand. We were just MIG welding there.
Yeah.
And he had me run a couple beads around these truss stringers. And he looks up and he goes, it's better than those guys are doing. Put a helmet on. And I spent the next 2 weeks welding out those trusses. And then after that, I got kind of incorporated into the mechanic side of the company. And I've kind of done a little bit of everything in there. I've ran their composite shop for a little while. But I'm primarily mechanics now. So
So you've been with this company all this time, like since sounds
11
like
years.
2009, 11 years.
Yeah.
And that's the name of the company, or is this AMC? Is this you?
No, so my 9 to 5, I work for Michael Curry Designs.
Okay.
But my side gig is the AM Custom Fab. So I've always done stuff on the side.
Mm-hmm.
And when the whole craziness the last 2 years hit, I got laid off for about 5 months. And I decided to start a YouTube channel, and started hard into that and just started filming the stuff that I build. And it started growing a little bit. I mean, it's not huge, but it's progressing.
Mm-hmm.
It's
So the
somewhere.
stuff you're building, like I'm looking at this stuff. like, Did you like? Do you do your own CAD work? Do you do your own design? Because it sounds like did you go back to school to learn how to do some of this? You're running equipment. You're running a CNC. You're running there's a CNC plasma here. There's brake presses. You got everything. Looks like SolidWorks you're using maybe. Um,
Fusion 360.
okay, so you're using Fusion 3. I'm an Inventor guy. I use Inventor. So is this all self-taught, or did someone teach you, or how did this work?
Combination of self-taught, school of hard knocks, and also some good mentors at my work. Like, I've got several people that I wouldn't be where I am at today if it wasn't for them. Just really good mentors in my life, from mechanical stuff to digital stuff to work ethic. I got a
Okay. Yeah, no, it's some pretty neat stuff. And like, I mean, some of this isn't just like I picked it up tomorrow and I'm gonna figure this out. Like it's, I mean, pretty good designs. Like, I mean, I do a lot of design and custom work, and I know that some of the stuff isn't easy. Like, you don't get it right on the first try. Like, you know, you gotta you gotta work at it, right?
No.
So I want to step back though. I want to step back because I am curious about some of the stuff you told me. So in a family of 15, if I'm doing the math right, you know, 13 children and two parents, unless you
Yep.
got more than two parents, I'm not sure how that works
Nope.
in
All one
Oregon, but
mama, all daddy.
so who else is in the trades? Like there's got to be more than one of you. Like
Um,
lay them out. Who does what?
my I have the third oldest. He actually worked with me and under me at the company for probably about 3 years, but he's recently moved to Idaho, and he's currently working at a shop running. Uh, he's running a Haas right now,
Oh,
a
cool.
CNC mill. So he runs
Hmm.
a Haas for 10 hours a day, and then the rest of them are in construction more or less right now. And
Hmm.
then I've got another brother that's in some kind of like digital rendering and arts and stuff like that. So,
Hmm.
and then the other ones are still younger. I mean, my youngest brother is 5 years old.
Oh man, your parents have been busy. They're in for the long sport. They're like
Yeah.
They should go into the Olympics of making children. Don't tell them I said that. That's kind of weird, but you know, as I'm looking at your stuff, it's curious. So many of my past guests, like in this last few weeks, so much of what I've been around, including FabTech, has been art, right? Like artistic design, artistic welding. But you're more industrial. You're more like functional. Like you're designing and you're making stuff to either extend cabs, drive shafts, suspensions. A lot of what I see here is like frame support, sub rails. You know, you're doing a lot of that stuff. And then you got some artistic, you know, elements, but mainly just with like how you design it on the table and how you lay it out. But it seems like you're much more of an industrial minded thinker. Am I wrong or am I right?
No, I'd say that's true, definitely to an extent. I mean, I definitely have a little bit of an artistic side. Working with the people that I do, there's a lot of art that goes on in the day to day at my work. So I like to say where form meets function. So
Hmm.
but I do a lot of mechanical stuff. My dream would be to be in the kind of automotive, kind of trophy truck, that kind of industry. Like I said, suspension, that kind of stuff. But I'm not really in the region for doing that and be able to make money at it. I'd need to be in like Southern California, Arizona to be able to really make money at that kind of thing. So,
Well, you know, I would, and this is maybe a piece of advice that you may or may not take, but I would look into your local um, picture vehicle union for the movie industry because that's some nice side work you can pick up randomly that I've done for a while. And I picked up a couple really good gigs, and they film movies all over. So I'm sure they film movies in Portland. They probably roll in, do movies there every now and then. They do it all over the world. Like companies will just roll in and film a movie, and they
yeah.
always need people to build their vehicles, and they're not flying people in for that. They pick up locals and they go through their union. I think like, I mean, this is years ago. I got on a couple movies where we got to build a bunch of cars, like, and like I'm talking like there was this movie we worked on called Super Hybrid where there was like this killer Nova. This Nova would kill people. It was like this cheesy B movie, right? But we had to build like 70 Novas, right? They were all 1970 to
Wow.
71 Novas because some of them were for crashing, some of them were for shots, some had the big giant motor in them that would be like, you know, doing burnouts. Some of them were like totally stripped down for camera shots. So inside was like ripped right out, and we'd have to build in custom rails for mounting cameras and for blowing them up. We got to blow up a Suburban, so we had to design this rail so that we could pack like 14 pounds of dynamite under the back of a Suburban and then fire it off. And the director was like, I want this thing to flip twice in the air. He was like really specific. I want this thing to do 2 flips in the air. So we're like, okay, let's see if we can figure that out. And you know what? All that stuff was just random. Like you, I had my little shop and I just got in. Someone was like, "Hey, you guys know how to work on vehicles. You're a welder. You're a fabricator. Yeah. Well, these movies are coming to town. They might need somebody to help out." And I was like, "Hey, sign me up." So you know what? You should look into that because picture like I mean, it's
That's a
not
good point.
it's not steady work, but it's nice side work when it pops up, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I've had a little bit of experience with working with directors and stuff like that. I was
Hmm.
we built the last Beetlejuice Broadway show, so I was in DC for a couple weeks, working with the directors there and on installs, so teaching them how to use the puppets and stuff like that, and breaking anything if it sometimes performers will get into stuff and they take things beyond their limits. And you're like, no, I can't quite do that. That's not made to do that. So teaching them how to use it, and then trying to adapt to what the producer wants and stuff like that. So that's a really good idea. You should check that out.
Yeah, and I don't know how it works in the US, but for me, I just like Googled like movie union, and they have like a construction union, a food union, and they're all like, I think it's like $180 a year to have your membership, and then if they come into your area, you're on the list. They give you a shout. It's like cool. One of them I just
Cool.
had like I remember this one movie slid through Dolan's Cadillac with like Christian Slater. It was like they had a bunch of old Cadillacs and they just want to shave door handles. It's like all you gotta do is just shave door handles and put in popper kits. Perfect. Gravy. Like
Yeah.
I can do
Cool.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you know what? This is a perfect time to take a break. We're gonna go to our commercials here. So you guys make sure you stay tuned. I got Alex Jordan here, and we're gonna be talking more about his experience and his cool stuff that they got going on. And then we're gonna talk a little bit about what he was doing at FabTech. So make sure you don't go anywhere, and we'll be back here after the commercial break. And we're back here. My name is Max Ceron, and we're the CWB Association podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We got Alex Jordan here from AM, or no, sorry, I keep thinking it's from,
You got it
so
right.
my company's SMC Fabrication. So let's see, your AM Custom Fab. All right. So and this is his side gig, and I love your welder fabricator YouTube 79 Ford F250. Is that the love of your life?
Yeah.
Aside from your wife, of course, right?
Aside from my wife, but yes,
Yeah.
I've had
So
her for a long time.
The wife or the Ford?
Both, but the Ford came before the wife.
All right, and like I mean, you said you took some time off, or maybe not on purpose, but COVID, right? You decided to get into the YouTube thing. Why? Like, why YouTube? Why not? Like, did you always like watching YouTube videos and thought I could do that? What was the motivation there?
Couple different reasons. I mean, yes, I've always watched YouTube videos. I mean, I'm slightly dyslexic, so visual learning is definitely my jam. I'm not
Mm,
a look at a manual kind of person at all. It took me 5 years to finish high school, so I'm kind of dumb
mhm.
when it comes to that stuff, but I make do. But so I already liked learning that way, so I wanted to be able to share with others the experiences that I've had and the stuff that other people have taught me, and just kind of pass that on. But also, like, another thing that came with that is just kind of like self growth. I do not like being in front of people and cameras and stuff like that. So, and I know public speaking is a good skill to have,
Mhm.
and also with that is communication. When you put something on a video, it really forces you to break down your communication and decide how you're going to deliver that message in the most efficient and understandable way. And so just a kind of like a self growth thing. And I was already doing all this fabrication stuff in my garage. So I was like, I might as well try to video this and just improve on my skills of communication and stage fright, and just kind of overcome some of those things and share what people taught me. So that was kind of the drive behind it.
So if someone's listening to the podcast, you're a young guy or whatever, a person that's in the trades and are thinking about starting up a YouTube video, what were like the tools you needed? Did you just like a stand and a phone and you gave her crud, or like what
Pretty,
did you do?
pretty much. I bought a little GoPro, and that was what I started with. And then as I kind of like learned and grew, and then I got a little light to stick on my GoPro, and then a microphone to stick on my GoPro, so it wasn't as crackly. And then as of recently, I spent a little bit more money on a camera, not a lot, even though I've got like a $600 camera, so I haven't spent
Hmm.
thousands of dollars on equipment. I mean, the sum of equipment that I've probably spent in the last year is under $800.
Oh
Actually,
man,
in the last 2 years.
yeah.
So
It doesn't take much. I have people ask me that. They're like, man, you guys, like the podcast sounds good. Some people notice like, production quality. We try to do a good job, but it's not a lot of money.
mhm.
Like, I mean, you just got to be smart. There's certain things that I've spent money on, like this microphone. I wanted a good mic, but then the rest of the stuff, there's good brands out there for, I would say, $100,000, and I'm running like a pretty damn good podcast, I think. Anyways, people seem to be all right with it,
Yeah,
and I think that's awesome for young people, for anybody that's thinking about doing something like this. Like, yeah, man, jump in. Like, you know, if you're just jumping in and saying like, you know what, I'm off work, let's make some YouTube videos and get them online and get some followers, awesome. But here's the next question that leads from that. Did you start making money off that? Like,
Uh,
is that a thing? Like, like people are like, oh yeah, put up YouTube videos, big deal. But like, I mean, you start getting cash, like, yeah, yeah.
yeah, no, it's definitely not enough to live on right now, but
Mm-hmm.
it's starting to support itself, I should say.
Well, that's good.
As far as, I mean, because when you're doing projects and stuff like that, there's money that goes into it, whether it be
Mm-hmm.
materials for your project, or there's always the nuts and bolts that you don't have, you got to run to the hardware store for, and all that stuff adds up.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, between Google AdSense and some other affiliates that I'm partnered with, and then I've actually got a sponsor, Prime Weld company. I'll plug them, but
Mm-hmm.
they've been providing me with machinery, and I've been doing reviews on their machines and stuff. And what I really appreciated was just they're decent quality for an entry level price, and
Yeah.
so a new person can get in and use this machine or these machines. I say this machine because I primarily use their 225 amp TIG machine, and it's got 225 amp. It's a dual voltage machine, and it does AC/DC pulse welding up to 200 pulses per second, and it comes in at $825. And I really appreciate an entry level machine that can still do good work. So that's what I've been kind of encouraging with a lot of my videos, is just my philosophy is, I had somebody message me the other day and ask me if they should get this specific a certain machine, or if they should wait and save up and buy the better one. And
Mm-hmm.
my question to them was, are you losing out on a job that you could be making money with because you're waiting to buy the better one?
Yeah.
My opinion is, buy what you can afford, do with what you have, and then use that money that you made off that job to buy the better one. Because otherwise you're just sitting around waiting to buy the better one, or waiting to save up for the other one, where you could be using those tools to grow your portfolio. And then when you get the better one, use it as your little one as a backup, or sell it, whatever.
Yeah. And that's great advice, you know, because I believe the same thing. I got 3 welders in my garage right now. One of them I had like 25 years, maybe 30 years now. It's like the first AC/DC, or sorry, just an AC buzz box Lincoln 225 that runs off 240, 220, 240. It's like the old Tombstone, like the Tombstone Red, the
Yeah,
old one that's
yeah,
I've had that thing forever. And I paid like $300 for it back then, and it's loud and it's obnoxious and it's heavy. But you know what? I would just drag that thing in the back of my truck and run an extension cord, and I would get some jobs done, and I would get paid. And make fun of my welder
exactly.
all you want, but that paycheck's in my pocket. I don't care, you know.
Yeah,
And then later
exactly.
on, I saved some money and I bought a different one, and you know, kind of expanded as I went. Plus, I was a shop guy. I was never much of a home shop guy because I always worked for shops that they would let me use the shop, like my whole life pretty much. So, and then I went to go teach at the college, and they let me use the college. So I'm not investing in plasma cutters. I'm not investing because I always had access to it. Like,
Hmm.
why would I spend $2,500 on a really awesome, you know, plasma machine, which awesome if you can afford it, when I can just use it at work. So I would just stay after work for 3 or 4 hours, cut all the things I needed there, and then bring them home. Right. Like, I mean, it was
Absolutely.
no big deal. Right. I did after FabTech 2019. I saw all these new inverter technologies, right? Like, I was amazed at all these new inverter machines. So we're talking like the size of a loaf of bread, 200 and 200 some amp, dual voltage, and with like a 40 to 60% duty cycle. I was like mind blown. How the hell is this even of, you know, this machine 10 years ago would be like huge, and now it's a loaf of bread, right? And they were doing demos, and I picked a couple up and played with them. So you know what? I was like, I need to get one of these. So I did what I would say every salesman that's listening is going to cringe right now. I, I went on some no-name Chinese website, typed in inverter welder, got one shipped. Like, I'm talking shipped to my door for $250. Okay. And I've been running that thing since then. So this is 2 years. I've been running this thing in my garage. TIG, stick, no AC though. That's the one thing. I should have got the
Mm,
AC one. Doesn't have AC, so that's where it kind of that was on me. I was just like, oh, I should have done that. But this thing welds awesome. Like really, I've
Yeah.
had no problems with it. And yeah, sure, it's a no-name Chinese brand, and if it breaks, it's out in the garbage. But you know what? This thing's made me way more money than the $250 it cost. So
Mhm.
so be it, right? Like
Yeah, no shame in that.
now the Prime Weld machine, is that what they had at the Weld Metal Online booth? Is that one?
Yeah,
What did they
that's the
have
one
one?
that they were giving away. So they had 3 machines there. They had the Fronius, the Prime Weld,
Mm-hmm.
and then the CK's machine. So that was the center one they had there in their booth.
Yeah. And
And
that's the one
yeah,
with all the dials on it, right? It's got a bunch of red
correct.
dials. Right.
Correct. And some people get intimidated by that, but I prefer that because everything's right there in front of you. A lot of these smaller machines are super nice because, like you said, they're compact stuff. This is still an inverter, dual voltage, but
Mm-hmm.
you don't have sub menus to go through. And
Well,
I get
Fronius is
lost in.
favorite for that. Like
Oh,
Fronius has like a bazillion options that I'm like, what's happening?
yeah. I mean, I can't knock them for it. It's a very good machine. I
Mm-hmm.
welded it with it there and stuff. But those sub menus get really intimidating. And there's a point when you're starting out that too detailed is too much. I mean, for years they've welded with, even on AC, with just 60 hertz and maybe a balance knob, maybe
Yeah.
not. And so there's a point where I feel like you can have too much starting out and just overcomplicate things. And then you go to concentrate on things that don't matter as much. They're things that you need to concentrate on once you've developed those basic skills. So if you have something that, in my opinion, yes, the knobs can be intimidating, but everything is right there in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in my opinion it's simplified, but it can be intimidating having lots of knobs.
Just seeing all the knobs there, right? And it's funny because when I was teaching, I come from a mining, kind of heavy industry background. I never really did any aluminum welding in my life. Like, I mean, it's just I didn't do anything light like that. Everything I did was heavy duty.
Hmm.
So when I started teaching, part of the courses had aluminum. So I was like, oh damn, I got to learn how to do this better if I'm going to teach it. Like,
Yeah.
and they have these really nice Miller Dynasties, which are primo TIG machines, right? Like they're primo TIG machines, and they have all these options. And I remember I was like playing with it, and the more I played with it, the worse it got. Like I just kept making it worse and worse and worse and worse. Then finally, I had to go to like one of the other instructors. I was like, "Hey, Kevin, can you give me a hand here?" And he's like, "Yeah, what's up?" I'm like, "I'm trying to get some practice in for this TIG aluminum, and it's not going good." And he looks at the machine. He's like, "What the hell are you doing?" He's like, you got this thing just all messed up, just all ass backwards." And he's like, "Let's just reset it." So he showed me how to reset it back to start, which is a very handy thing. I was
Oh, I
like,
didn't know they could do that.
yeah, you have to hold like 2 buttons down and like it just goes all back to like its initial
Factory
settings.
reset.
Yeah,
I need to
factory
learn how to do
reset.
that.
And I was like, oh, and then I'm like, well, this is way easier. And I'm like, why would anyone even need to change anything? Like, it works good like this. Like,
Exactly. I mean, there's a place for it when you get into like really
absolutely.
thin stuff, you can fine tune it. But like you said, when you're starting off, you just can go with the basics and learn from there.
Yeah, I remember. It was stick. It was like actually I think it was Ferronius. It was like I went to go stick weld in some shop. Somebody asked me to come weld at their shop, and I was like, yeah. And they're like, oh yeah, we just got a stick machine, and it was like a Ferronius machine from like the '90s, right? And it was like, oh cool, Ferronius, they're good machines, right? And it was just like a DC stick welder. I was like, okay, pick up the stinger, go to turn it on. There's a button, which I was like, well, these old machines are fun. They already were LCD back then. Like that's pretty cool.
Wow.
And then I was like, uh where's the amps? Right? And they're like, well, you got to go here and you got to set the duty cycle, and then you got to set this forward balance, and then you got to set this like arc distance percentage. And I was like, so like
I
there's
just
not
want to
just like,
weld.
yeah, like isn't there just a knob? Like I know 7018 1/8 120 117 is like my magic number. Pretty much any machine 7018 1/8, like this is 20 years of me welding 7018, like it's the number. All 4 positions, I don't care. It's gonna be beautiful. I'm like, I want to set this to 117, dude. And he's like, it doesn't do that. Like you gotta figure out the ratio. And I was like, okay, you know what? I don't like this. Like, so basically, then you gotta have a guy stand there, and I'm like, strike an arc up, up,
Yeah.
up. Like, now, what do you work on mainly in your shop now? Like, on in your side hustle, like the projects that you got rolling in that you're working on. What's the stuff you're working on now?
Currently, the job that just came in, I just was finished up a twin turbo kit, or actually 2 twin turbo kits for Toyota Supras. I did a stainless and a mild steel kit for a guy, and he was coming back and having me weld some O2 bungs on it today. And then also he's trying to start his own business, selling turbo kits and other Supra merch kind of stuff. So he's a Supra guy, and he's selling mid pipes. And so he bought these pre-bent, mandrel bent mid pipes that he had done, and then I made a fixture for him so that he could weld on either bolt flanges or V-bands, whatever he preferred. So he had an order come in, so he's bringing the jig in and having me weld a V-band on one end of it and a bolt flange on the other to meet the customer's application. So I was just trying to get those all welded up. So
do you do just the piping for them, or do you do you do the the intercooler parts too, or any of the mounts? Because usually they go with bigger intercoolers. You got to change the mountings on them and stuff like that.
The last project he did, yes. I got a core and the intercooler caps and did all that.
Did the
for
tanks,
him.
the end caps,
So, yeah. And that was kind of a trick because he bought these, I don't remember what brand they were, but they were like 1/4-inch cast aluminum caps.
Really?
And I was just like, man, I don't like welding cast aluminum. It's doable, but if it's something that's going to be on an expensive car, the percentages of getting a nice clean weld out of it are less.
Are low.
So, I mean, it turned out nicer. I had to preheat them in the oven, so I brought them up to 250 degrees in the oven, especially since I just had this little 225 amp machine. And so preheated them up to 250 so that by the time I got them out to the shop and got everything jigged up, they'd
They're
still
like
have a little heat in 'em.
150.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, something that helps really good for small shops that I found is the brand called Infratech. They make a infrared heating lamp, and that has been the awesomest tool for doing cast aluminum because you can set that lamp over a part and bring it up to almost 200 degrees with that lamp, and then start welding on it. And then I like to throw it right back under that lamp so it cools down slower, especially if you're doing two dissimilar materials.
Yeah, they're gonna pull.
You don't want that shrink rate to happen as slow as possible. So if you can cool that down slower and throw it back under that lamp, you're gonna have a lot less chance of having cracks or anything like that. So
That's super cool. Like, so does this lamp just run off 110? Like,
yeah, it's just a 110 lamp. The brand is Infratech, and it's about, I'm looking at it over here. It's about 2.5 feet long and about 6 inches wide.
Oh, so it's bigger. I'm picturing like this little like teeny baby lamp. Like, this is it's pretty big.
It's about 2.5 feet long, about 6 inches wide. And actually, I use it in the wintertime for heating because it heats your project up too. Like, because I don't have heat out in my shop, and so you don't have to like heat up the whole shop. You just set it kind of like 5 feet away on your project.
Well, and cold steel has so much water in it, right? Like cold steel has so much humidity. Yeah.
Exactly. You could sweat all that out and stuff. But other projects I work on are just kind of random. Like yesterday I did 10 little cams for this company that does ammunition loading, and the factory cams on their loading machines that kick the cartridge out, because they have this setup where they can turn up the speed and do so many rounds per and they were having problems with it throwing the cartridge out too soon. And so they're like, can we make something that is more gradual? So is this built these cams and did a little machining on them and stuff. And
so do you have any of that?
Working out really good.
Do you have any of that equipment in your shop? Like any of the CNC stuff or plasma cutters? Do you have that in your shop, or do you kind of use your boss's stuff?
Mostly mine actually. I can give you a quick spin around tour. I'm actually in my shop right now.
I was hoping so. You got a bunch of steel behind you. I hope it's not your bedroom. Like,
no, that's my rack. So you look down here. I've got a CNC plasma cutter. I've got a Smithy 3-in-1 lathe over there on the wall. And then I've got, got a bender over there, and then I've got another little milling machine thing over there. So I have a small shop. It's a 14 by 20 feet. So it's pretty small.
More than enough, man. That's all you need.
But by the time you stick a lathe, a milling machine, a 4x3 plasma table, couple welders, couple toolboxes, it gets tight. Fab table. So, but yeah, I do a lot of that at home. And actually, some of this equipment is, like I said, been sponsored and stuff, but a lot of it I just save my pennies and just don't be in a hurry.
Yeah, look for good deals. Yeah.
Like
hit
that
up the auctions.
That lathe, actually, I had a job where I did some welding for a guy local here who's building a literal monster truck in his garage.
Mm-hmm.
And I did some work for him, welded for about 4 hours for him. And he's like, well, what do I owe you? And he had a big lathe that I could tell he was using regularly, but this lathe was off in the corner covered in cardboard boxes, and it looks like it's been sitting there for about 5 years probably. And I'm like, I'll tell you what, I'll finish welding out your chassis and I'll cut whatever gussets you need on my plasma table for that lathe there. And he's like, oh, no. I'm like, well, don't worry about it then. It's on the house. And I walked away. And so I welded for about 4 hours for him. And then he called me back about 2 weeks later. And he's like, hey, can you come do some more welding for me? And so I spent probably another 4 hours that evening welding on his chassis. And he's like, well, what do I owe you? And I said, that lathe. And he's like, I don't think so. And his wife was walking by, and I said, well, it's no money out of your pocket. It's sitting there and looks like you haven't used it in about in a long time.
Yeah.
And his wife heard no money out of his pocket come out of my mouth. And
That was the deal right there.
That was the deal. And so I'm like, well, so I told him, don't worry about it. It's on me again. And I walked away, and he called me that night, and he's like, okay, we can do the lathe. And so I got that lathe for no money out of pocket. I did about 40 hours worth of welding for him, and then I cut some gussets and stuff out on the plasma cutter and did a
Barter,
trade.
man. It's the barter system. I talked to, I think it was about 10 episodes ago. We had a small business guy on here. It was like, when you're starting out a small shop, your skill is worth not just dollars, but trading, right? Like trade power.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're a small shop, you got to barter. And even now with social media, you can even barter your followers. You can be like, hey, man, like I'll weld something for you if you cut it all out for me, and I'll throw it up on Instagram and promote you. Right. Like you can even do some some promotional stuff. Like we got a guy here in Regina. He's an awesome aluminum welder, right? I'm terrible. Kevin R306. He's an awesome aluminum welder. You should follow him up. He's good. So anyways, I got a speedboat, but I wanted to fish out of it. And like it doesn't have like the trammel mounts for like for fishing stuff, right?
Poles and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, well, I'll design it all up and I'll get it all cut out. I got a company in town that cut it all for me. So I got all this stuff cut, and I was like, I'll just give it to you, man. Can you just weld it up for me? Because I don't want to do it. I got it all designed and all ready to go. And he's like, yeah, all right. So he welded it all up. It looked awesome. And so I took all these pictures, put it on my boat, took pictures of it. It's works awesome. Been out fishing with it lots now. And people have been emailing me like, how much you sell those things for? Like, I mean, because like, I mean, can you design that for any boat? It's like, of course I can. Just like, I mean, I need a picture of the boat and some dimensions, but I could probably design something up for you. And it's like that kind of stuff goes a long way.
Sure does.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So sorry, go ahead.
Good.
So what's your plan, now kind of with the shop going forward? Do you see you moving into a commercial space and hiring some staff and doing this? Like, does your area have enough work to support this? You think you can make a go at it, or are you happy with it kind of being the side hustle? And sounds like you love your normal 9-to-5 job too. So
yeah, I don't exactly know. Actually, as far as space goes, I actually just got some information on a potential space today even, and it's a 30 by 30. So that would be, I got to go
huge.
look at it and stuff like that, but that would be huge for me. But I got to figure out logistics and stuff. But as far as, I don't exactly know. My dream would be to maybe have some sort of structured work for my company, my 9-to-5 company, 2 days a week. So I have some sort of structure, and then the rest of the time do YouTube and side hustle stuff. Cause there's lots of work. I've got people I'm booked out the rest of the year on side work.
Yeah.
But so that would be my dream, but
yeah.
I don't know what that's going to look like in the timeline of that and stuff like that. I do enjoy working for my 9-to-5. I've got to travel with them and stuff, not since all this craziness has happened, unfortunately, but so I don't know what that's going to look like in the future. So, because I've had opportunities to go to Paris and Japan a couple times and stuff like that for installs for puppets and parade floats and stuff like that. So it is an interesting job, and I have appreciated it. And those people are family too. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with them for over 10 years, and I've had times where my largest paycheck, I had 108 hours of overtime on one paycheck. So
That's a
it was
lot of work.
188 hours in 2 weeks. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've been through some shit with these guys, and so they're family, and I would hate to just walk away completely, but also I enjoy the idea of doing stuff on my own time and having a more passive income kind of. I mean, I'll never stop working, but the
Yeah.
YouTube and stuff like that, if for some reason I wanted to take a month off, like it's you still got to put into it, but
Mm-hmm.
it'll kind of coast, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get it. I'm terrible at it, to tell you the truth. I pick up too much work all the time.
Oh yeah,
I overload myself. Like just this
same.
morning, I had talked to my wife. I was like, I'm like anxious. Like I woke up this morning with my hair on fire, like thinking about a million things and all these things. And so like in the weird craziness of life, me, just the kid who started welding when he was 17, now I'm like running like a $1 million company and doing podcasts and doing this
That's
stuff at
awesome.
FabTech. It is awesome, but man, sometimes I'm like, what am I doing? And then plus someone calls me up and it's like, hey, can you build me 60 more stands for this project? Because I got my products that I'm known for, so all of a sudden I'll have orders come in, and I have discounts on orders if you go over a certain amount. So sometimes I won't hear from one of my clients for like 8 months, and I'll be like, kind of forget about them. And then, but they haven't forgotten about me. They're just waiting for their order to get big enough so that they get the discount, right? So I kind of kicked myself in the ass doing that deal, because then all of a sudden I'm like, oh yeah, they're not around. I don't know what's going on. And then all of a sudden I get an email being like, okay, we need 180 of those. It's like, what? Like, when am I going to do that? So then I'm hiring buddies to come help me out. And it's so my advice to you as a 29-year-old going on to 30 with the side hustles is make sure you pace yourself. Don't burn yourself out. You know, give yourself some space to sit and do nothing.
Well, that's where I'm similar at too, because I've done the overtime and stuff like that for several years, and now I've been with the company long enough, been able to negotiate, and I work 4 9s right now, so I get to take Friday and spend time with the kiddos and
Hmm.
kind of do the side hustle Friday through the weekend. So I've been enjoying that this last year.
And do you got 13 kids?
No, and I will not.
Was that your decision or your wife's?
Both, but
How many kids do you got?
I have two. I have a 9-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. So
Oh, they're still little. They're still babies.
yeah,
Yeah, it's hard to travel when they're little like that. You miss them.
yeah.
When they get older, it's easier. You're like, bye, see ya. All
No,
right,
it's been
man.
fun.
So, just the last couple questions I want to ask you. With FabTech, this opportunities for someone like yourself going to these conferences. What do you see as being of value to you to be there? Like when people are asking, like, why would you spend money to go to a conference like that? Why would you go to FabTech? Why would you go to, ours in Canada, CanWeld? It's our big one, which is very similar. Why do that? It's hard to explain to people the value. So what would you say would be like a value to you? Like if you're talking to one of your welder buddies that's thinking about going to FabTech, be like, you should go because of X.
For me, it was the connections and the networking. Like, even if I didn't have a YouTube channel or trying to build that social media stance, like just meeting people that are in the industry but have certain niches that you can grab their business card and put it in your portfolio and just know you have that resource. And you kind
Hmm.
of have the opportunity to talk and chat with those people face to face and kind of, I mean, you can't tell what somebody's character is all at once, but it's a lot easier to see who you're working with if you're talking to them versus shooting back and forth with emails or whatever. And if you can shake their hand, for me, it's a better peace of mind, and you remember it more. And just I learned so much at FabTech. It
Yeah.
was, and honestly,
Hmm.
the convention was sweet. There's so many cool tools or toys, whatever you want to call them there.
Yeah.
Um,
You
but
wanted
the
to say
big,
toys because
Yeah, I know, right? But the biggest thing that I got out of it was honestly the evening things, like going out with people that you met there, going out to dinner and just talking like we are here and just learning how other people learn stuff, learning what other people do, what resources are out there, what their experiences are, learning techniques from them, just shooting the breeze with people that are in the kind of same genre, but not necessarily the specific niche that you're in, and
Mhm.
just learning. I love to learn.
Awesome. Yeah, and I agree with you, man. It's a fantastic experience, and I always tell people to try to get out to these things if you can, because the networking is huge. And I mean, the whole reason I run this podcast now, like it's been a while now, is the networking. I find that the stories amongst welders, and as a young guy growing up in the welding community, these would be the stories around the lunch table. These would be the stories at the bar with my welder buddies. You know, the guys from the rigs would come back in and they'd tell their rig stories, and then the guys from the mine would come in and they would tell their mine stories. And you know, I was shop guy servicing both of them, so I'm like building the things that they're installing, right? So everybody's got these conversations, and in a lot of ways, people keep saying that the community's dying. The community's dying. There's not these, like, the association numbers are dropping for my association, the AWS association, all the IIW, all these associations around the world. The numbers are going down, but that's because millennials, Gen Zs, they're not so keen on signing up for stuff and being on these newsletters. Like,
Yeah.
that's not really the way they operate, you know? So it's like, well, how do we keep this alive? And I think the podcast, webcasts, YouTube channels, this is how people communicate now, and this is how you keep those networks alive, because we love to talk to each other. We do. We love showing
Yeah.
off what we're doing.
And I love hearing what other people do too. Like
Yeah,
both ways. It's great. Like you
100%.
said, the stories. The
Yeah.
stories is where it's at.
So last question to end off the podcast, because it's been a ton of fun, and I just want to ask you, you know, as in your professional opinion now, as a shop worker, you know, and then now looking to start up your side, or you have your successful side hustles and your business on the side going, what would be a good piece of advice for someone that's looking to maybe get into the side hustle game? You know, someone who's working the 9 to 5 right now and has a little bit of shop space at home and is like, you know, maybe I can start doing some stuff on the side. What kind of advice would you give them?
I would say start small. Don't go out and go into debt for anything. I would say save a couple bucks, get your standard tools that you need, get a small welder, get a grinder. Those are your two things that you can do work with, maybe a cordless drill, and then just start doing jobs and then putting pictures of what your jobs are out there, because we have this great tool of social media now and you can spread it all over the place. And yeah, I would just say start small. Like I was saying earlier, like I know a lot of people have the mentality buy once, cry once, but and I do agree with buying good quality stuff at some point, but you have to be able to start. I mean,
Hmm.
you can't succeed if you don't start first. And if you are just waiting and waiting to save up and for a nice piece of equipment, and you could have been making money with your $200 TIG welder like you're talking about. Like, I mean, how many jobs would you have missed out on if you had
Hmm.
waited to spend $5,000 on a Dynasty 280?
Or I would have tried to do those jobs with my other welder and it wouldn't have worked out, right? Like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. So I would just say, like you said, go figure out what you can afford and move on from there.
yeah. That's awesome advice, and it's very, very true. It would be like me saying to you, "Hey, man, you want to go to Japan? I'll give you a free ticket to Japan." And you get to the airport and being like, "Ah, it's not a nice enough plane."
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what? Just get on the plane. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, man. Well, it's been a lot of fun having you on the show. You know, I love seeing what you're doing. I'm sure I'll see you at FabTech next year. I think it's in Atlanta next year. We're
I
already
sure hope
talking
so.
about. Yeah, I hope you're going to be there. At some point when our things open up, FabTech Canada is in June. I don't know if you ever come up to Canada or you got a passport, but FabTech Canada is going to be up here in June. I think the 14th to 16th, and I'll be there definitely because I'm helping host that. So, you know, we'll see each other again, buddy.
Yeah, I hope so.
All right. And you know, for all the people that have been listening to the shows, thanks so much for your support. You know, like none of this happens without the people that follow this and download the shows, and you know, and also support all the other awesome shows out there that are going on, all the podcasts. We all really appreciate the followings down at FabTech. We really found out, you know, all of us podcasters, how much people listen to us. It's kind of crazy. You know, it's like we're running into people all over the place. They're like, hey, and that makes us feel good because it's we do it for the passion, and it's very much appreciated that people take the time to sit down and listen to us blab.
Absolutely.
All right, well, take care, and we'll talk soon, and make sure everybody that you keep downloading and sharing the CWB Association podcast.
We hope you enjoy the show.
You've been listening to the CWB Association Welding Podcast with Max Ceron. If you enjoyed what you heard today, rate our podcast and visit us at cwbassociation.org to learn more. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions or suggestions on what you'd like to learn about in the future. Produced by the CWB Group and presented by Max Ceron. This podcast serves to educate and connect the welding community. Please subscribe, and thank you for listening.